Hi, friends. Welcome to episode 340 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at @LMS_United. On Threads and Instagram, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Bluesky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, the School Librarian's Guide to Almost Everything, and my conversation with Maura Madigan. Friends, I'm so excited. Maura Madigan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to be here.
I am so excited to share this conversation. Friends, I have known that Maura and I were going to have a conversation at some point because you wrote an amazing book. And first thing I did was reach out to ALA Editions and I asked for it to be sent to my house so we could have this conversation. So Maura, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us about the library you work in, the grades you serve, and some of the programs you offer.
Sure. Okay, well, I am a school librarian in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County, which is right outside Washington, D.C. And this is my 11th year as a librarian. For the past 10 years, I was an elementary school librarian. And this year I've moved schools. And I've moved levels. So I am now a secondary school librarian at a school that serves grades 7 through 12. My old school had about 400 students, and my new school has over 3,600. There's also 4 librarians at my new school. So lots of changes. I went from basically being the only person, no assistants, no volunteers, me doing everything, to now I have 3 amazing colleagues to collaborate with. And it's been a lot of fun.
Friends, you will remember, for those of you who listened 2 weeks ago, episode 338, Celebrating School Library Life, when we interviewed Rachel Grover and Stacey Gilbert, also school librarians from Virginia, we learned a lot about how the sort of ratio of a number of students to school librarians. And so this idea of, wow, you've got 3 colleagues who are certified school librarians you go to work with every day. That is amazing. If I want to see a school librarian during my day, I have to drive quite a distance to another school district to do it because I am the only one in my district. So that entire dynamic would be an absolute, both magical and a minefield. I just...
It is amazing. There's a lot of changes that I've had to grapple with this year. How do you do ordering when there's 4 people? How do you, what if you disagree with some of the policies, or what do you do if, just figuring out the division of labor? I'm very lucky that the other 3 librarians are just extremely professional, very easy to go along with, very supportive, because I know I'm still sitting in that uncomfortable phase of when you switch schools or switch roles, which honestly I think is really important. I loved my old job and my old school, but it wasn't really challenging anymore. I'd kind of done everything that I wanted to do. And I was ready. I had taught middle school and I was a high school instructional coach before, and I was ready to go back to the big kids. So I was ready for challenge, and I was ready to just kind of mix things up and be uncomfortable, and to be that learner, and to be the one in the room who's like, I'm not quite sure how to do this. Can you explain this to me?
And I imagine that your new colleagues are excited to work with somebody who, as a veteran school librarian, is not coming like directly out of, graduating and this is your first job and you have context. We can scaffold because all of a sudden you've done this before, but you're in a new space and you can come to this with an appreciation for the people who have worked there. And I think, and I will say, like you, I taught elementary first and I did that for 14 years in 11 different schools. But I also could do my job in my sleep. And there were enough things about my job I was ready to change. I will say, as you know, when you walk into that new setting for the first time, and again, it was a choice I made, I think the only thing I missed about my previous job was feeling capable. And I missed feeling capable, knowing everybedy's names, knowing the extensions I needed to call, knowing who was who. And it was the unfamiliarity of being in a new school. Being in a new library felt comfortable because I was like, this feels comfortable. But being in a new school was definitely the part that took a while. And I would encourage anybody who has a thought that, I love what I do, I just want a new challenge, to absolutely seize that opportunity. So let me ask you, this is the first time you and I have ever met, which is wild because I know we've been in the same conferences at times, but just not encountered one another. So I'm very excited. We have many mutual friends in common. But I feel like this opportunity has been really fun. ALA Edition says, hey, any authors you want to interview, please let us know. We'll be happy to send you a book. And when I saw your book that was just recently released, I knew this was a conversation I absolutely wanted to have with you. This is your third book with ALA Editions. You've already authored 2 other books. Could you give us just a brief glimpse into those? Because you published 2 other books, one in 2021 and one in 2022.
Yes. So the first book is Learning Centers for School Libraries. And the second one is Project-Based Learning for Elementary Grades. So both really were born out of what I was doing in my elementary school library. And very much the learning centers was something that I had presented on at conferences, and I knew that there was a lot of interest in this. And I think it was 2019, I was just finished presenting, and a colleague of mine said, you should write a book about that. And honestly, it had never occurred to me before. Now, I have an MFA in creative writing, right? So I have a writing background. I've taught writing at the college level, but it never occurred to me to write a professional book before this. And I said, that's a good idea. So I went home, bought my own laptop because I only had my school laptop at that point. And if I wrote it on my school laptop, then they would own my book. And I got ready and wrote a bunch of proposals.
I'm hoping you'll walk through the steps a little bit because there are people tuning in right now who have writing a book on their, bucket list of things they'd like to do professionally. And as somebody now, this is your third book with ALA Editions. What would somebody need to do if they have a concept in their mind and they would like, as you have now successfully done 3 times, and they'd like to write a book for ALA Editions?
Sure. There's a lot of information actually on their website. If you go to ALA Editions to, I think it's like author's information or something like that, they have a copy of the proposal that they want you to fill out. So there's a whole process that you would go through. I sent it to, I think, an older person who wasn't really there anymore. And actually, Stephanie Book, who is the AASL editor, emailed me back and it went to junk mail. And I deleted the first one. And then finally she emailed again and I said, S-Book, what is this? It looks like fake. This is fake. and opened it up, and I was thinking, oh, snap. I can't believe I, deleted it. So from that point, they actually took my proposal and made suggestions. So there's two main editors that work on the school library books. There's Stephanie Book, who is the AASL side, and then there's Jamie Santoro, who is the ALA editions side. They're both phenomenal. They're extremely supportive and just fantastic editors. But they gave me suggestions on how to improve my proposal.
Well, so can you give us an idea from concept to completion? What kind of time are we looking at?
So the Learning Centers book and the Project-Based Learning book kind of both followed the same timeline, where I submitted my pitch or my proposal in like December, and then I had a contract in March. And then I started writing. And for both of them, it was during COVID. So I had a lot of time at home, and they would comment on my chapters and I would make revisions. So we're kind of, by the time we were done, I was finished with most of it. I would say it was about a year after I started writing, a little more than a year to publication.
So where some of us became really adept at making sourdough bread during the pandemic and putting on 15 pounds, you wrote a book. You wrote 2 books. And that's, I tease. I actually went to a weekly publication. So I went to having a weekly show, and that was my need to do something productive during the pandemic. So I find that amazing. I would hope that listeners tuning in, we're going to put a link in the show notes, friends. And, definitely, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So definitely give it a shot. Let's talk about the format of your book. The School Librarian's Guide to Almost Everything follows a favorite format of mine. It's A to Z. And your contents, your table of contents, read almost like an index. But this was fun because I really felt like there was so much I wanted to talk with you about. But I'm enjoying this book thoroughly.
Oh, thank you. This book is very different from my first 2. Honestly, after the second book, I thought I was done. I was like, there's nothing that I can really write about in depth. There's not one topic that I'm that passionate about. And I was at ASL in Tampa, and I was talking to Jamie, the ALA Editions editor, and she's like, well, what have you got? What ideas do you have for another book? I'm like, I don't know. I don't really have anything. I'm like, I'm all over the place, right? I'm really passionate about equity, and I'm really passionate about this, and I'm really passionate about that. Like, I really just like to give advice to people. I kind of went home, and then it was like percolating in the back of my mind. And I pitched this as it's sort of like an encyclopedia meets a car manual meets an advice column.
Oh my gosh, you nailed it. That's exactly, it was fantastic.
Right. So I wanted it to be very user-friendly, right? I wanted it to be very visually pleasing and fun to read and fun to use, and something where you just cut right to the chase, right? You don't have to scroll, you don't have to wade through all these paragraphs of introductory material. And I'm one of the people who, when I read novels sometimes, I just kind of like skim through and go right to the dialogue. So that's what I envisioned. And so it is a little bit of most topics that I think school librarians are really interested in knowing more about, right? Because there's some things you only do maybe once a year, and you don't necessarily remember it until you have to go back and do it again. So this is something that ideally librarians have on hand and they would pick up when they need it. Not something that you would read from beginning to end.
Well, and I think, you and I apparently have a lot in common. This podcast was born out of a need to connect with fellow school librarians. But at the end of the day, it really came from a space in my heart where I really offer up a great deal of advice. And I apparently was offering it up to people in my family, and they were sort of like, would you please start talking to somebody who cares about what you do for a living? And I was like, well, how's that going to happen? It was like, oh, I guess we're going to create a podcast. But you're right. I absolutely agree with you 100%, because it isn't like you start on page 1 and you're going to plow through this and absorb everything you need and be done with it. You revisit it as there are things. I know mine is just in going through it to get ready for today's conversation is bookmarked with all these things I'm really excited about. And I think especially because as I was going through this, and we'll talk about this more, the people that you connect us with are a lot of leaders in their profession, people that we've encountered in conferences. Often you're tapping that expertise to bring these in very digestible amounts. I have a great deal of respect for people who write doctoral dissertations, but it would be very hard for me to genuinely enjoy reading their expertise on the page because of how dense it is. And the way in which you have broken these different, because it's A to Z, alphabetical, you've got these chunks of concentrated advice and expertise and best practice. We were talking about this a couple episodes ago, this idea of expertise and being able to, have it in a format that we can enjoy and apply when it's, best practices. So let's go ahead. What I'd love to do is, when I was taking a look at this, it is alphabetical, and it doesn't surprise me that some letters of the alphabet are not included, like X. You didn't force it. You're like, I have to have an X. No, you don't. The xylophone of librarianship, unless you cheat and do an excellent doing with the X. Anyway, it was fun to mention that a letter like the letter C has 14 entries. And so I think that's clever because in the case of going through this sort of encyclopedia of best practice in our profession, you stopped at the letter C and had no less than 14 different entries to explore. And I love that because you didn't sort of arbitrarily just constrict yourself to one thing per letter.
Yeah, basically I started with a list of over 100 topics. And it this book took almost 2 years from conception to publication. This was a lot longer than the other two, also because it was so diverse and because I necessarily wasn't an expert on 100 different topics, right? So I had to actually do some research or look into it or talk to people. And so the Read More appendix, all of the resources that I recommend there, I've actually read them. I've listened to the podcast. So these have been vetted by me as these are really the best resources to read more about these topics.
I'm finding this so relatable because it is not unusual for me to interview a guest, and I have simply taken on the responsibility of being the ignorant person in the conversation. I'm going to ask questions out of sheer curiosity and ignorance because I'm talking to somebody with a PhD or doctorate, and I'm not. I just press record, and we're going to learn from your expertise. And I appreciate having to go and seek out those experts. We have a lot of experts in our profession, and they are generous and they are lovely to work with. And I have been very grateful. I'm sure you found there are many people perfectly willing to talk with you to build out the content in this book. So I do want to focus on one particular C. So this child of the 70s, I had Cookie Monster singing C is for cookie. But for me, it's C is for conflict. And this was on page 4. It started on page 45. You talk about conflict, and it really did inspire me to I want to sort of announce right now, friends, if we could possibly this winter, I would like to do another call-in show. We've done this in the past where we've crowdsourced our content. When I interview people, they're bringing that expertise with them. And so I'm going to throw this out to our listeners. I want to do a conflict episode where we're going to crowdsource this because starting on page 45, you talk about conflict resolution with administrators, with your assistants, with your adult volunteers, with learners, our students that we work with fellow educators, and with families. Friends, there are so many ways that we have to work with other people in our lives to do our jobs effectively. I would love more than anything to appeal to our larger listening audience and talk about conflict and the success that you've had in dealing with conflict resolution with any of these groups of people, because I'm just grateful that Maura had this section in her book, because it reminds me of how many people we have to learn to get along with.
It's funny that you focused on this one, because I think most of it is from experience. I guess I've had a lot of conflict.
No, you've been at this long enough. That's what it is. It's not that you create conflict, it's that we don't have the opportunity to simply ignore issues of conflict. And if you stick at this long enough, you will anger somebody, you will cross somebody, you will find that somebody doesn't agree with our methodology. But no, I think we have to address these things.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to be on your podcast, your conflict resolution podcast. Also, for those of you listening, if you're going to be at AASL, my session that's loosely based around this book is a panel session, and it's called Crowdsource Your Questions. And it's going to feature Kelsey Bogan, who is high school librarian extraordinaire, Dr. Andrea Trudeau, who is a middle school librarian who is also fantastic and Amy's friend, and Casey Blaylock, who is Virginia. She used to be a middle school and high school librarian, but she is now a district supervisor. So come, bring your questions. It's going to be a very lively session, and it's going to basically be an opportunity for you to get answers to whatever questions you have.
I love it. I think it's very easy to go to a conference and take on the role of sit and get. I'm good. My brain is just in a place of passivity, and I'm just going to sit and get this expertise. And I love that this raises that bar and asks your audience to engage with the experts that you have arranged to be on your stage, because it is absolutely wonderful when the questions that you have as an audience member are being addressed by the people who probably come at this with a great deal of experience.
Right. And we're also going to have the audience to participate.
Absolutely. So, whereas your first two books were deep dives into an individual topic, a concept, it would be easy to presume that this book is a mile wide and an inch deep. But it really isn't, because the book's topics are supported with your extensive works cited and appendix. And it's an invitation for your readers to sort of personalize this reading journey by expanding on that knowledge base that you have referenced in your appendix and your works cited.
Thank you. And they're all, everything in here is based on the AASL standards and best practices and ALA position statements. So those are integrated throughout. So in my introduction, I state sort of my core beliefs, the foundation of where all of these ideas have come from. And really the AASL standards, the ALA best practices and position statements, that's the bedrock. While the AASL standards and ALA position statements, the ideas are woven throughout, I've actually quoted a few when it's most applicable, right? So I didn't force it. I didn't feel like for every single topic I had to have a matching standard or a matching statement. Just really where it's most pertinent and it felt right organically to appear.
Absolutely. And, again, we are always working in the moment, and school librarians are constantly modifying what we do. But at its core, we do all agree that there's some, that the position statements that really do drive some of the best of what we have to offer to our school communities. And so it's always sort of in the background, and it's important to remember. the impression I got reading your book, I'm struck with the awareness of just how varied and expansive the knowledge base is of the school librarian today, how much we have to sort of be ready to address in real time as we go about our daily business.
It really is amazing just how varied our roles are. And honestly, I think that's one of the things I like most about the job is, on any given day, I could be, teaching an IB art class, how to find scholarly articles. And I could also be, doing a makerspace activity. I could be ordering books. I could be repairing books. I could be overseeing parent volunteers.
But I think the wonderful thing about your book is it embraces this idea that we really are all over the map when it comes to our skill set.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It would be easy to assume that this book is only for rookie librarians. But I'm telling you, friends, this 19-year library veteran is really enjoying using this book as a guide to evaluate my best practices. I'm going to give you just a couple examples. On page 52, you go into a great discussion about displays and the nuances of displays. On page 60, you have school library equity audit questions and bullet points of how you evaluate all aspects of a school library. On page 68, School Library Makeover 101. Here is another episode I would love to record with somebody. And this one, page 89, Tips for Facilitating Change. Again, as a 19-year veteran in the school libraries, I am sitting here reading this cover to cover and realizing I'm not done learning.
I think none of us are really done learning. And honestly, educators, librarians who are done learning, it's time to retire, right? So I completely agree that certainly new librarians, school librarians would benefit from this. I would have really appreciated having something like this when I started out. But things change, right? Everything changes, and each of us should be reevaluating what we do each year to keep it fresh because we have new students coming through. We have new faculty. We have changes to curriculum. We have changes to society that anybody who's doing the same thing year after year without change is really stagnant.
This needs no explanation, but I don't care where you are in the country, school librarians do not have the luxury of coasting. I have worked with many educators in the classroom. In core classes, they know will never be cut. No one is going to cut sixth grade math, for example. What happens as a result is you get a lot of this people who are simply doing things they can call upon the work that they've done year after year after year. It is embarrassing because I'll see some of it come off the copy machine and it's like, oh no, this looks, I can date this myself. But truly, we owe our students our best. And given that so many of us are in situations where we are constantly on the chopping block, we don't have that luxury of becoming complacent because it's something that we've done and we've been able to recycle year after year after year.
I agree. I think each one of us needs to ensure that we are essential to the school, and not just ensure that we are essential, but that people know it. Right? Our students need to recognize it. Our teachers need to recognize it. Our administrators need to recognize it. They need to see the value in having a school librarian in place. Because yes, otherwise we are on the chopping block. And I am very lucky to work in a state and a county that really values school librarians. I feel like I have pretty good job security. But you don't know. You never know. That could change. Legislation could change. The school that I've come to now is amazing. I mean, honestly, it's there's so much collaboration going on. There's so much teaching. Every day before school, the half an hour before classes start, we get between 200 and 300 students in our library. every morning. Every morning. So the team that I'm joining have done an excellent job in getting teachers in the door. We actually started the year basically fully booked with classes because they sign up in the spring.
Wow. That just sounds exciting. And I'm going to say this, I've said this every time I interview somebody who works in a state that is doing such a good job of making sure that school librarians are valued, they're members of the school community. Friends, if I had to pick up, it's hard to say what I would do 19 years ago when I started this profession, but I'll tell you what, I would feel very comfortable if I was looking for a new place to call home. Virginia sounds like a fantastic place to be a school librarian right now.
Virginia is, and my county in particular is amazing. We have guaranteed annual budgets. We have central processing. We have district supervisors, and we have 2 elementary library specialists and a secondary elementary library specialists that, we have PD built in, several meetings a year where we can meet as, with all the school librarians, and then broken up by secondary and elementary. So lots and lots of support.
And shout out to those Virginia school librarians who are tuning in right now, because I'm going to get to meet you in a couple weeks after AASL. I'm going to be joining your state conference and in November, and I can't wait.
I know. I'm so excited. You're going to be the keynote.
It has been on my calendar now for a while. And it is, honestly, friends, when you start the school year and realize you have so many fun things to look forward to, and one of them is leaving to spend some time with the professionals in a state who are investing in themselves. And it really does make my calendar is full, because I get to choose to spend it with people who are excited about being school librarians. So let's go ahead. Shameless self-promotion. I did look at the book's appendix because I was just in awe of how thorough it was. And you mentioned episodes of this podcast. You mentioned 3 in particular: Administrators as Allies with Dr. Trudeau and Sean Galliard, VR and Building Empathy, also with Dr. Trudeau, and then Preparing to Interview with Alex Scarelli, and Virtual Job Interviews with Courtney Petland. And I was just like, oh my gosh, the podcast has always tried to be a resource to people when they need it. And I'm grateful that these particular episodes really landed with you, because for me, I'm always about making sure we provide school librarians with the resources they need when they need it.
Right. Well, honestly, it was hard to restrain myself. I could have listed many more than the 4, but, I wanted to really try to be well-rounded in a mix between, podcasts and articles and books. But yes, I probably could have listed one of your episodes for most topics in the Read More appendix.
Well, and forgive me, but you better believe I was looking at the experts you had cited. Don't be surprised when I start reaching out to them for an episode on the show. It works. It goes both ways, friends. It absolutely goes both ways. I've offered up this stage for school librarians who would like to broadcast and share their expertise, because that really is the threshold. Friends, I'm going to tell you right now, not bragging, but I do regularly get in my email requests from publicists and marketers, folks who think that this podcast would be a great place to interview their author. And the first question I have for them is, are they school librarians? And that basically ends the conversation, because if you're not a school librarian, there is no invite. And they're with rare exceptions. And I knew that when I saw this book from ALA Editions, I wanted to make sure that Maura had a chance to come on, because when you put that kind of work into generating this amazing resource, which can benefit those of us across the profession, it really makes sense to do this conversation and share this with our listeners. I am so excited, Maura. You and I have never met in person, but we're going to get to in a few short, my goodness, a week or so when this comes out. We'll see each other in St. Louis at AASL 25, and then again in Virginia in November.
I know. This is very exciting.
Maura, I am so grateful for your expertise. Would you let listeners know how we can find you on social media? It sometimes is a sort of a place that we go to try and connect with school librarians. Is there a way that we can do that best works for you?
Sure. Well, I am, for professional reasons, mainly just on Bluesky.
We'll link that in the show notes as well as the other resources that we talk about today. Maura, thank you so much for sharing some of this beautiful Saturday afternoon when we could be doing 12 other things. But I am grateful, and I will see you very soon.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. It was great to meet you and great chatting with you today.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. If you are curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast, then simply click on the link, which can be found in our show notes. Search title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year that you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode, and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make Season 8 your time to shine. Next week marks the American Association of School Librarians National Conference, which is held every other year. This year, school librarians from across the United States will be descending on St. Louis, Missouri to share, inspire, learn, and lead. I'll be meeting up with friends and colleagues and hopefully securing more than a few promises to record upcoming episodes. I will also be recording attendees and share their voices with our listening community in an upcoming episode. The topic of our next episode is community collection development, and my conversation with Alexa Dumas. I hope you will tune in.